Hi, this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and these are two little laptops that are coming out in the summer of 2019, and they're similar in a lot of ways, but also different in a couple of key ways. And so I wanted to do a quick video that shows some of those similarities and differences. This is the GPD P2 Max with an 8.9-inch 2560 by 1600 pixel display, and the One Netbook One Mix 3 Yoga with an 8.4-inch 2500 by 1600 pixel display. They both have the same Intel Core M3 8100 processor. This version, which is going for about $705 during a crowdfunding campaign, has 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigabytes of solid-state storage, versus this model, which is going for about $760 as of late June 2019, which has 8 gigs of RAM and 512 gigs of storage. So those are some basic differences. Right now, this is a little bit cheaper and offers more memory and storage. In the long run, it's going to sell for over $800. But you'll also notice that they're different in terms of size and a couple of other key features. So first thing I'm going to point out is in terms of physical dimensions. Yes, this model is smaller. It's got an 8.4-inch screen with the same resolution, which means that it's a little bit sharper at about 359 pixels per inch versus 339 pixels per inch. They're both very sharp displays, which means that right now I've actually got it set up at about 200% pixel scaling, which means that everything is about doubled. I can go a little bit lower if I want to fit more on the screen on this model. It's a little bit hard to go much below that on this model, though. So that's screen resolution. In terms of physical size, you can see that this model is a little bit wider, and there's good reason for that. But while we're looking at it from this angle, let's take a quick look at the ports. What we've got is USB Type-A and headset versus micro HDMI and headset, and USB Type-A, Type-C, and micro HDMI, USB Type-A, Type-C, and micro SD card slot. So what that means is you've only got one USB Type-A port here, but you do have a micro SD card slot. This one has two USB Type-A ports, but no micro SD card slot. So it's a little hit or miss depending on what exactly it is that you're looking for. In terms of size, they're actually pretty close to the same size. This one's sloped down a little bit, so it looks thinner in the front, but as opposed to the boxier shape of the One Mix 3 Yoga. But if you put them back to back, you'll see that they're actually pretty similar in terms of overall makeup. The GPD is actually a little bit lighter at about 1.4 pounds versus 1.5 pounds, but it's pretty negligible in terms of difference. Now, when you open them up, you will see some key differences in the keyboard area. And first of all, I'll show you that they both support fingerprint sensors, although I do find the fingerprint sensor to be a little bit wonkier and less predictable on the GPD. So let's go ahead and turn that off. Turn it back on, and see if I can log in. There we go. So slightly more effective fingerprint sensor. And if we look at the keyboard areas, you'll see that the fingerprint sensor on the GPD P2 Max is actually above the keyboard, and it's integrated into the power button, whereas here we have a separate power button and fingerprint sensor. So overall, that sticks with the theme, which is that I think the One Mix 3 Yoga, generally speaking, has a better keyboard. It's a backlit keyboard. There are no backlit keys on the GPD, and it's also a larger keyboard with 6 rows of keys for a total of 67 keys as opposed to 56 keys in this 5-row keyboard. Now, there's a reason for that, which is that GPD put a full touchpad down here, something that their earlier devices with 7-inch displays did not have. But having that full touchpad means that you've got support for multi-touch gestures, scrolling, clicking, and so on. So I much prefer to have that touchpad as opposed to this optical touch sensor that we get over here. It's a little bit harder to use, doesn't support any sort of fancy tapping tricks, but you do have left and right buttons for clicking if you want to do that. But the keyboard itself, slightly better key travel, larger keys, an extra row of keys. We've got full-size number keys, separate delete and backspace. There's a few quirks. The tab button is in an unusual location. Some of the punctuation marks are in unusual spaces as well. And so that can make typing a little bit slower than maybe it might be on some other devices. But overall, I find typing to be pretty pleasant and can hit somewhere around 80 words a minute pretty consistently on this device, which is close to what I would get on a full-size computer. This model, the key travel's not quite as good. The coloring is slightly better, so that when the backlight's off, you'll notice that on this gray and silver, it can be a little bit harder to see the keys. Here we've got black and white. It's a little bit easier to see, although the blue can be tricky. but without the backlight, it's a little harder to type in the night. The number keys are also half height, makes them a little bit harder to type with, so it takes a little more getting used to, but once you do get used to it, out of the box I was almost instantly able to hit 60 words a minute, and after a few minutes hit 80 here. Here it was more like 40 or 50, and then 60, and then 80, but I'm talking, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes of practice. I'm not talking about days and days of getting used to the keyboard, so neither one is horrible. Let's talk about one of the biggest differences between these two devices, which is this is a traditional laptop that can open to about that far. This is a convertible laptop that has a 360-degree hinge that keeps going. So I can flip this over and use it like a tablet. It supports touch input. The keys on the keyboard, for the most part, turn off, except for the power button and the fingerprint sensor, which are placed in a situation that makes them kind of hard to touch by accident. It also supports pen input, so you can use any pen with Microsoft Pen Protocol. So a Surface Pen works, or this pen that's about a $20 add-on if you buy it from Geek Buying, which sells this for about $760. So we've got support for pressure-sensitive pen input, and you can check out other videos for details about that. So backlit keyboard, pen input, 360-degree hinge, nice keyboard. Overall, the One Mix 3 Yoga is a pretty nice device, but there are a couple of things that you can do with the GPD P2 Max that you can't necessarily do with the One Mix 3 Yoga. So let's take a look at the webcam. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. At the webcam. There we go. Camera application. There is no camera on the One Mix 3 Yoga. There is a camera here. Now, it's a sort of awkwardly placed camera because it's actually below the screen, and if you tilt it forward, it obscures the view, and if you tilt it backwards, depending on sort of how you position this, you might get a nice view of my nostrils and my knuckles. So it's better than not having a keyboard or a camera at all, I suppose. But if you have a smartphone or a tablet or any other laptop that has a camera, you're probably going to get a better experience if you use that as opposed to having to go this way. It's also kind of low resolution. The frame rates aren't necessarily the best, but there is a camera, and that's a feature that you don't get on this model. You also get a slightly larger battery. It's got a 34.96 watt-hour battery versus a 33.11 watt-hour battery. And what that means in terms of real-world performance is going to vary depending on what it is that you're using it to do, but when I played the same extra long Netflix video nonstop, started them both at the same time, the battery on this guy died about 20 minutes earlier. So I got 4 hours and 50 minutes versus 5 hours and 10 minutes of battery life. Slightly bigger battery, so despite having a larger screen, you get slightly better battery life. Another interesting thing is that they both have the same Core M3 8100Y processor, but the GPD P2 Max actually has it set to run at 8 watts to 15 watts versus, I'm trying to multitask just to make this more visually interesting, but on the One Mix 3 Yoga, it's running at between 7 watts and 15 watts. So 8 watts, 7 watts. You wouldn't think it would make a huge difference, and it's not a huge difference, but if you do come down here and look and sort of see, where's the, there we go, 7 watts versus 15 watts max, 8 watts, 15 watts max. In terms of real-world performance, when I ran a series of benchmarks, I consistently found that the P2 Max scored higher. So even though it's running slightly higher, it is offering better performance and better battery life. So I think there are some advantages to the P2 Max. I wish I had a backlit keyboard. I wish the keys traveled a little bit more. I wish it was a little bit more comfortable to type on. I would not mind at all if it had a convertible tablet-style design. And I wouldn't mind if the fan was a little bit quieter. They both have fans. Neither of these are fanless or have passive cooling, but the fan runs a little bit more constantly. But that might also help with performance, so I'm not necessarily going to complain too much about it, and the fan isn't super loud. So which one is a better buy? It depends on what it is that you're looking for. In terms of pricing, they're actually pretty comparable at this point. You can find benchmarks for more details about performance at liliputing.com. I guess I should show you also, that's not what I wanted to do. That's not it either. Screen brightness, it's a little bit hard to show on here, but the maximum screen brightness is not too dissimilar between the two of them, but the dimmest the screens go, it can go substantially dimmer on the P2 Max. I also find that the color reproduction seems a little bit more accurate on the P2 Max. I'm not really, I don't have the skills or the tools to do a really detailed analysis of the color reproduction, but what I can tell you is that when I was watching that Netflix video, it was a 5-hour train ride or a 7-hour train ride video. I noticed that scenery looked a little bit more bluish, purplish here, and maybe a little bit more true on the P2 Max. So I think the display might be a little bit more accurate. I'm not 100% certain, but overall, that's what impression I got from it. So it depends what you're looking for. If you want a better keyboard, a convertible tablet style design, support for pen input, I think the One Mix 3 Yoga is a pretty nice device that gets almost as good battery life, offers almost as good performance, and while it sells for a little bit more now, in the long run, it's actually going to be potentially a little bit cheaper. Now, that said, the P2 Max is actually going to come in two varieties. The version I'm looking at has the Intel Core M3 processor, but there's also going to be a version with a Celeron 3965Y processor that during crowdfunding is going to sell for, I believe, about $529 instead of $705. It's not a huge price difference, and I think it's probably worth getting this model unless you really want better battery life, because the Celeron processor is going to be substantially slower, but also drain less energy. So you should get, if you're getting 5 hours of battery life while watching videos here, maybe you'll get 6 or 7 hours of battery life, and maybe you'll get even more if you're using it for casual computing purposes. Heavy-duty multitasking, you're not going to get 5 hours. Gaming, you're not going to get 5 hours. That's just sort of an apples-to-apples comparison I wanted to do, which is why I ran that video test. Another thing I should point out is that they both come with USB Type-C power delivery chargers, relatively compact chargers, 30-watt chargers, and you should be able to charge them from power banks as well. So that is a quick look, a quick comparison of these two computers. You can find more details at liliputing.com about each of them in terms of performance, in terms of design, in terms of more photos, close-ups, and so on. It's kind of tough to decide which one is definitively better, because I think they both have their strengths and their weaknesses. And both of them, in general, I think are a lot more usable than some of the 7-inch models that we've seen from both these companies in the past. The 7-inch screens are nice, but it's a little bit hard to do a lot of multitasking because there's not a lot of room for viewing multiple things at once, and the keyboards on those devices are a little cramped. They're more pocketable, they're a little bit easier to slide into your pocket or into a bag, but these are still relatively compact, especially when compared with most other computers on the market. This weighs about 1.4 or 1.5 pounds, measures 14.9 millimeters thick. This weighs about 1.4 pounds, so it's a little bit lighter and a little bit thinner at 14.2 millimeters, but they're pretty similar overall. One other thing that I forgot to mention, stereo speakers versus mono speaker, and this one takes a lot longer to charge. After I ran that battery test, they were both pretty much down to nothing. When I plugged them back in, I found that while the screens were powered on, this one said it was going to take about 4.5 hours to do a full charge. This one said about 2.5 hours to do a full charge. When you turn off the displays, they charge a little bit faster than that, but overall, I think you do get, even though they both have 30-watt chargers, this one charges more slowly than this one. So, yeah, find more details at liliputing.com. Check out the description of this video for links to articles about these little laptops. Check out Liliputing's YouTube channel for more videos about these little laptops. And this is Brad Linder with Liliputing, and 2 Liliputers.